Bro, my question is, what happened?
Wow. Good question. Great question. Just like always inside the Moto Academy, what happened?
Yeah, what happened?
What did happen? Okay.
Dude.
So let's start from the beginning here. We had a test day scheduled on my calendar. I forget what the date was.
What month is it right now?
It was September 29th, was it? Whenever we had the Jet and Hunter class scheduled in Tampa.
Yeah, I want to say September 29, yeah.
I bought a flight for my mechanic to fly into that class so that we could live stream him building the bike for Inside the Moto Academy, and then I was going to test it then, which would have bought us time to where if it didn't run right, which it wouldn't have, we would have been able to troubleshoot the issue over the course of the next, not month.
No, a couple weeks at least. We could have ordered a key and carb and been done with it.
But hurricane, blaming this whole thing on the hurricane, basically.
It really is the hurricane's fault, to be honest.
Essentially. I mean, down to the core of it, it's the hurricane's fault. So we obviously had to scratch those 2 days. And for those of you thinking, well, what about any other days? If you could look at my calendar on my phone, you would realize that that is an impossibility.
Yeah.
My schedule is absurd. And so I found 2 days when it could have happened. When those got wiped out, there was no backup plan. So the backup plan essentially at that point was and sorry guys, do I sound really sick?
I can't tell from here.
Great. Okay. Because you just can't hear me?
Yeah, I can't hear you at all, okay. Really.
So the backup plan was to fly in on Thursday of straight rhythm and ride Thursday afternoon at Glen Helen, essentially, is where we decided to choose. So my mechanic, Dan at Royal Power Sports, flies in on Wednesday, builds the bike, everything. They're bragging about how perfectly everything comes together, the fact that they found like a pro race shop to build this bike in. They're over the moon with how well everything is going.
A little more detail. The bike came in a box from Italy, went to Florida for us to put it together there. Didn't end up doing it. So we shipped the bike in the box to California. And everything that could have gone wrong went wrong with that. The shipping company was like, oh, you can get it on Friday. And like we were supposed to ride it at Straight Rhythm on Friday. We're like, no, we need it Wednesday because we got to put it together Wednesday, go ride it Thursday. So Dan and I, you guys saw this in the vlog if you watched it, we had to go to the shipping place and like they had to take the box off the truck to give it to us, which they like don't do that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So like the fact that that worked, Dan and I were like over the moon. We're like, guys, this is happening. And then it was like, we didn't have tools. we didn't have anything. Right. So then we reach out to Jacob Hayes and Jacob's like, oh, I got my buddy who has like a shop. We're like, oh, cool. We expected a garage. And we go over to this shop. Not to mention there was like hours of driving in between these moments. Hours of driving.
Everywhere was every single location, even once I got there, was an hour to an hour and a half.
Everywhere. You're an hour and a half from everything in California. No matter where you are.
Horrible.
You have an hour and a half to go. So we're driving for hours. You know what I mean? Anyway, we get to the shop and it is a full-blown race shop. Every tool we need, just set up. You guys saw it in the vlog. And this is just Jacob Hayes' buddy's house. You know, like Jet and Hunter's mechanics showed up just to say hi. Like everybody's very connected and like lives in the same place. A pro circuit mechanic showed up. Actually, the dude who helped tune your bike at Straight Rhythm, not Mitch, but the other guy was there that night.
Bones?
I don't think it was Bones. It was a younger kid.
Oh,
the younger one.
Oh, okay. I don't know his name, but I don't know
his name either. Sorry, buddy. Anywho, but it was just like all coming together, dude. We were like, this couldn't be any easier.
So then I'm on a plane Thursday and I think you guys got to the track Thursday morning to Glen Helen.
Yep. That's where.
And then waited.
Yeah. We got there and Dan and I had a nice morning. We went and got breakfast. Like the bike was together and running. Like we were dialed. We went to Glen Helen early because we heard like Anderson and Pro Circuit and all those guys were going to be testing on the Supercross track, which they were. So we rolled up, found Kenny Day. He gave us a boxo, like a Moto box. So we had tools for the rest of the week.
Shout out Kenny Day.
Kenny Day saved our lives. We'll talk about more of that, I guess, as we go. Gave us boots, hooked it up. We got there right when Ken Roxon was flying in the helicopter out of Glen Helen, and Dan and I are sitting at Glen Helen. We're like, this is sick. Like, we're at Glen Helen. You know what I mean? We've always wanted to be here. And our big thing, which in hindsight, I mean, how would you have thought this? Our big thing was like, we're not going to ride the bike until you get there. Like, we wanted you to be the first person to ride the bike. In hindsight, I should have brought my gear and gone to ride all morning, but...
Okay, so, but my question would be, he started the bike, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Multiple times, probably started it Wednesday, probably started it Thursday before I got there. Did he never rev it enough to be able to tell that it had that crazy gargle once you got to the top end?
What he did was heat cycles. Like, he was breaking the bike in. You know what I'm saying?
So he never really...
No, he never got on it because, like, we didn't know if the engine was brand new. We don't know anything. So we were just heat cycling it for you. So when you got on it, it didn't tear itself to pieces. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. So that was probably one thing that in hindsight we could have and should have probably done is like Wednesday after heat cycling it a couple times, maybe Wednesday night, that bike should have been revved. Because it was very obvious. As soon as you would rev that bike, it was no bueno. So I get there, I get geared up, I hop on it. This is Thursday, Glen Helen.
3 p.m.? 3:30?
3 p.m.? 3 to 4 p.m. at this point. I make it to the Glen Helen sign, which is in the first turn. So I make it the start straight. Mm-hmm. And on the start straight, I'm like, okay, maybe it's not warmed up somehow. And then I stop at the top, try to clear it out. Nothing. And so I ride it back. I'm like, oh, okay, no good. So now the scramble begins. The carb that's in this bike is a Mikuni, which I've learned so much about carbs and still this weekend, still know nothing, but I knew really nothing before.
Nice.
Ow.
Oh, that echoed all the way to Vermont. Jeez.
Woo. Had a stock Mikuni carb in it, a fully custom exhaust built from scratch, and a custom air boot that's like 3D printed. So those were kind of the three big variables, I would imagine, with the two-stroke. Other than that, it's got to be fairly simple, right? And then the fourth variable would be fuel. So we ran C12, which is VP.
Yes.
For fuel. As soon as I pull off, Dan goes into his toolbox and realized that the jets that he has to make changes are for a Kean carb, which I ran on my Supercross 125, which is probably the carb that we would have wanted right from the get-go.
Yeah.
So those carbs or those jets don't fit. Now we're in a scramble. We're running around the parking lot trying to find people that have jets. I asked these two very German-looking fellows that ended up being from Austria and working for KTM. Super nice. Talked to them all weekend. They were out there riding 2023 KTM 250s. They didn't have anything. They're also the ones who tuned the bikes that Plessinger, Cooper Webb, Hansen, and Ryan Morris rode at Straight Rhythm.
Of course, the new KTMs are fuel injected.
Those were all fuel injected. Yeah, so they didn't have anything. And now you guys then hop in the car and go to Chaparral, which is the biggest dealership probably on the face of the planet.
It was incredible. It was like Bass Pro Shops, but for dirt bike riders.
And they didn't have jets. So I'm like, cool. Okay, there goes Thursday. So I'm sweating it a little bit, but at this point, I'm like, I remember from the past how much time Red Bull gives us on Friday to practice. So I'm like, okay, all good. I'll have Friday. And what happened Friday morning? How did we get the jets eventually for that
Thursday
bike?
night? I can't even remember. Dan and I. Oh, okay. So that's what happened. So Dan and I, you and Jackson took off. Dan and I went back to that shop because we heard a friend of the person at the shop might have jets. So Dan and I drive an hour and a half back to the place. And then we just it was a nightmare. The guy that we were supposed to link, it was so sketchy. The guy we were supposed to link up with gave us an address and we're like, all right, we'll be right there. He's like, oh no, I'm not home yet. Don't come until I'm home. And we're like, all right, we'll go get dinner. So we went to In-N-Out. In the In-N-Out parking lot, we ripped off all the plastics because we had to bring them to the hotel room to put graphics on.
Yep.
And we're just sitting in In-N-Out. And we're like, hey man, we're going to come by now. He's like, no, we're not there yet. I'm like, oh my gosh. So Dan and I just drove closer to the place, and we were just sitting on the side of a road, and we were there forever. I mean, we probably waited another 45 minutes to an hour. And at this point, it's 9:30, 10 o'clock, and we're like, we have an hour and a half drive back, and then we have to jet this thing in the parking lot of the hotel. And we're like, this is ridiculous. And then after waiting 45 minutes to an hour, we're like, this guy's doing us a favor, so we don't want to like be bugging him the whole time. But we sent him another message, and we're like, hey, like, what's going on? He's like, oh, I've been home. I thought I told you. And we're like, oh my gosh. So we finally pull up to this place. The address brought us to the sketchiest little situation. We were like, what is happening? But sure enough, dude comes out. He's super chill, super nice, hands us some jets. And we were stoked. We're like, all right, we have jets now. And then we drove an hour and a half back. And then I think that night, Dan was putting in the jets and doing the graphics. When we got back, you and Jackson were out cold already.
Oh yeah.
So we bring the bike. No, we didn't even put the jets in. We brought the bike to Kenny Day's house, left it at Kenny's house, came back with the plastics. Dan was doing graphics. I stayed up all night basically editing the YouTube video. And then we woke up, and then it was Friday.
Yeah, all the work that was done to that bike was almost done when I was sleeping inside of the hotel room.
It was insane.
So he did the graphics that night. Then he must have jetted it the next morning. We had a 2-hour time window to practice. In fact, I think the 125s just had a 1-hour time window to practice. So I go out there with the first jet option, still not even close. Now at this point, we have Mitch Payton there. We have everybody there. Mitch is trying to tune it. And long story short, we spend the whole Friday trying to jet the Mikuni carb, which again, in like each step along this process, in hindsight, we would have got rid of that carb probably right away, just based on the situation of the exhaust, the air boot, all that. I don't think that carb was really the answer, but we tried to tune that carb all day. It didn't work. Now it's Friday night late, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't practice at all. I did a couple runs where I was able to double a couple of small things, didn't jump anything else because it wasn't safe. I was lucky. Honestly, I was lucky to even get off of the start thing off the drop down. So now I miss all Friday. Everybody else is warmed up. They've learned all the obstacles. I'm like, cool. This whole weekend's like slipping away from us at this point, and I'm just getting a little upset. Friday night, we decide that we're going to take this carb from Stank Dog that he gave us, which is Electron, because we asked around everywhere. I put out an Instagram thing. Nobody, apparently, unless nobody wanted to give me one or sell me one, had a key and carb. So we were like, key and carb. This is Friday night asking everybody. Nobody had it. We take the Electron from Stank Dog, and then we had to find a throttle cable, which we found on Facebook Marketplace. So then Dan goes and drives and picks up the throttle cable from Facebook Marketplace, gets the Electron carb, which we later find out is tuned and set up for a 250. Did I tell you that yet?
No, I heard it in the meeting yesterday, yeah. We didn't know this until after the event, right?
Didn't know this until like yesterday. Because the Electron guy texted me and said, hey, that was set up for a 250. Cool.
Gosh,
so then we roll the bike into the hotel room. I'm asleep at this point already. Dan jets it, puts Electron carb and everything. Dan and Nemo of Royal Power Sports do that.
Whoa. You're just
Friday
blowing
night.
past all the details, bro.
Well, because I'm the best storyteller of all time, dude.
Yeah, well, if
Trying
you
to
don't
keep
want
this brief.
if you don't want to hit all the crazy details, I just want to portray how just ridiculous this whole weekend was, because he gave us Electron carb that we needed a throttle cable for. Right? We couldn't just put it on because we didn't have the throttle cable. So we all went out to dinner, and Dan's firing away on his phone and finds it's a whole setup, Electron carb to throttle tube, cable and all, on Facebook Marketplace. Finds it and buys it. So he has to drive another hour into nowhere to buy this entire carb setup just to get the throttle cable.
He bought the whole thing?
I think so.
Oh,
I'm not really sure.
Oh, yeah.
But, and then he drives an hour back. And at this point, this was the first night where I didn't stay up with the guys. Like, I was like, Dan and I bonded this week, dude. We spent like 50 hours in a car together. We were there for like 3 months, basically, is what it felt like. And I'm like, Dan, I'm sleeping tonight. I'm sorry. So they stayed up all night. And mind you, typically with a carburetor, you can like the air boot on these bikes or whatever have some give so you can just pop it out. But our custom 3D printed one required the entire subframe to come off. So changing out the carb was a pain. You can't just take it out. You have to take everything off. You know what I'm saying?
Oh.
So it was a job for these guys to put this different carb in. But anyway, yeah, bought it off
Which,
Facebook.
for all we know, that air boot could have been part of the problem.
Could have been.
So then I wake up Saturday morning. Now I have Electron in it. Go out there, first one, run with Electron. Bike still sucked, pretty sure. It might have been I think
better.
It progressively got more rideable to the point where I could actually do the big tabletop in the center, finally. I was able to triple a couple rhythms, barely, but finally. And then same thing. Mitch is tuning this thing. The Electron, you have less options as far as jetting, but you can still go more rich or more lean. Like there's a couple of options. And so Mitch advised us to continue to go more lean, which thankfully he did because we were going to go the other way with it. And got it pretty rideable. So that's what I qualified. My 3 qualifying runs were done on that bike. It didn't have a gargle at this point, but what it started to have instead of the gargle was a bog. And it would come pretty high in the RPM randomly. So it would happen like in the face of the big tabletop when I was third gear, like mid to 3/4 throttle going up the jump face, or when I would land the big tabletop. Pretty scary situations for it to be bogging. But at this point, we had no other alternative. We had run out of time. So then the race comes, the temperature dropped because it was cold and it was rainy and the temperature was changing quite a bit throughout the day. So now it gets later in the day when we're doing the race runs. And as soon as that gate drops for my first pass with Ryan Morris, just right out of the gate, I was lucky. Seriously, I almost fell in the hole in between the drop down and the mound of dirt. And I'm like right away 6 bike lengths behind him. I catch back up because I did the 3-3. Then I was so worried about my Superman and it bogged on the jump face doing the Superman. So I got terrible extension on that too, which I'm very upset about. He beats me round 1. Round 2, I was ahead the whole time. The one thing I'm good at in straight rhythm is I don't really mess up typically, right? So I will almost never botch a rhythm, which that 2-3-3 before the big table in the middle was very hard for those guys to get consistent. And I was able to get it every time, even with the bike bogging. But I was just really taking my time getting in that pocket. Had a big lead on him going into the whoops. And then he just blew by me at the end of the whoop section because the bike, I had to double downshift and seat bounce like crazy that double after the whoops because my bike would bog so bad right in that pocket. And he was able to just stay in the same gear in 4th gear or maybe even 5th gear and stand up and scrub through the double. It just blew right by me. Did you see the picture of him crossing over into my line?
I sent you that picture.
Oh, you did? How funny is that?
I know. Could have been different, but with the bike, it probably wouldn't have made a difference.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter, and the weather only got worse, so the bike only would have got worse. I mean, it was just amazing because anytime I've had a bike issue in the past, it always gets fixed. Even if it's an extremely big issue, always it gets fixed. And like Thursday turned into Friday morning, turned into Friday night, turned into Saturday, and it was like, no way. We're going the whole weekend here, and this bike isn't going to get fixed. It was hard to believe.
Couldn't believe it. It was
hard to believe.
First trip we've done where things just didn't work.
And the people commenting on Instagram were kind of in the same boat. Like, how are all of these, high-level mechanics working on this bike and not able to figure it out? But when you're in a time pinch like that and you don't have many options, you spend so much time troubleshooting a specific issue that once you move on from that issue, you've already overshot your window to like when you have only, half hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour to be out on the track at a time. next thing you know, the whole weekend just goes away.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer because straight rhythm is like, Carson Brown was riding great. Josh Reeves was riding really good. Derek Kelly riding super solid. Ryan Morris. There's a bunch of fast guys in the 125 class, but straight rhythm is my thing, man.
Dude, we shouldn't have this mindset. You're going to hate me for even saying this, and it's okay. Dude, if we had that KTM from Supercross, we would have been at least top 3, if not better.
Yeah, top 3 would have been worst case scenario, I think, for me. Again, not taking anything away from the other guys. It's just that Carson Brown is very fast. He would have been my biggest competition. His bike also runs completely perfect always. His bike sounded so unbelievably good. But of course, and it should.
PC bike.
Because this is a big event. These guys look at this event as a big event, which we were excited for it too, but we just weren't prepared. So
It's and we're usually not prepared.
Usually
but this
not
time
prepared,
was different.
but it does usually work out somehow.
Right.
And this time it just didn't quite work out. But the way I'll look at it is like I didn't get hurt, which that bike running that way very easily could have got me hurt. We met a bunch of cool people. I did a Superman, so it kind of brought the whole thing full circle from last.
Honestly,
straight rhythm.
that's all that matters to me is that we got the Superman.
And that is all that matters. But even with the Superman, like if it hadn't have bogged on the bottom of the jump face, I would have jumped 15 feet further. I wouldn't have felt the need to pull the Superman back before I got to full extension, and it would have looked 100 times better. But do you think the average person notices, or do they watch that Superman and go, oh, that was cool?
No, they probably thought it was dope. The crowd was stoked on both your races, honestly.
Yeah.
Because like the first one you did the Superman, the second one you guys were so close at the end.
Photo finish. Insane. Yeah, that was one of the closer runs of the night.
Yeah, which makes sense because you guys qualified right next to each other. We knew it was going to be tight, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, frustrating. So that was the weekend.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this clip and you want to watch full episodes of the podcast and send in video questions of your own, head over to club.themotoacademy.com.